Welcome to the first video lecture for the course ACC 211 Intermediate Accounting 2. So the topic that will be discussed in this video is investment property. Yeah. So the standard that governs the accounting for investment property is IAS 20. Okay, so at the end of this video lecture, we should be able to understand the nature and purpose of investment property, distinguish investment property and owner-occupied property, to understand the requirements for the recognition of investment property, to know the initial and subsequent measurement of investment property, and to know the recognition of transfers between investment property and owner-occupied property. Okay, so what is investment property? So according to PAS or IAS 40.5, it is a property that is land or building or a part of a building or both, okay, held by the owner or by the lessee under a finance lease. So to earn rentals or for capital appreciation or both. Ayan. So for this definition, an investment property must be a land or a building. Meaning, dapat yung investment property natin is immovable. Okay? So it is clear that only immovable properties, specifically land or building, can qualify as an investment property. Okay? Or pwede na rin part, no? Part of a building or both. Ayan. Now, again, it is held by the owner or by the lessee. Okay? So, under a finance lease. Ayan. So, basically, a finance lease is, this is just an arrangement, no? Between the lessee and the lessor, wherein the lessor will lease out a certain property to the lessee, okay? And the lessee will be paying lease payments to the lessor. And at the end of the lease contract, okay, of course, at the end of the lease contract, which is also the end of the lease payments. Ayan. Now, upon the uh, uh, upon the transfer of property from the lessor to the lessee, the owner now of the property is no longer the lessor. Okay, all the rights and privileges, the risks and benefits will now be transferred to the lessee. Okay? So basically, the owner of the property will now be the lessee. Ayan. So, again, a property leased under a finance lease, again, can qualify as an investment property. Now, an investment property, of course, is being held to earn rentals or for capital appreciation or for both. Ayan. So for example, meron tayong property. Okay? Either land or building or both, no? So, we list it out. Ayan. Or pinarentahan natin to tenants. Okay? So, if those property or if the said property will be, what? Will be, or may qualify as an investment property. Okay? If we are letting the space to tenants and then as a result, the owner will earn rental. Okay? Or pwede din naman for capital appreciation. Of course, alam naman natin that mostly land and building, especially kapag yung building ay commercial building, okay, as time goes by, the values of this of the land at saka ng building will what? Will appreciate. It will appreciate in value. Okay? So, if that's the purpose or if the purpose of the owner is just setting aside a certain property for capital appreciation or para ma-realize yung increase in value of those property, then it can qualify as an investment property. Okay, so here are examples of investment property. We have here land held for long-term capital appreciation. Yan, so increasing in value. Okay, held set aside, okay, para makarealize ng increased or increases in its value. Land held for a currently undetermined future use. So for example, hindi pa alam ng owner kung what's the purpose of the said land. Okay? Currently, okay, we can classify that or we should classify that as an investment property. Now, building list out under an operating lease. So for example, meron kang commercial building. Yan. Tapos, pinarentahan mo siya sa mga tenants. Okay, so again, as a result, the owner will earn rental income. So the said building leased out under an operating lease will be classified as an investment property. For example, vacant building din, no? Held to be leased out under an operating lease. Yan. And property that is being constructed or developed for future use as investment property. Okay, so kapag ang ano daw ang a building is being constructed and the purpose of constructing such building is for the future is to be held as an investment property. Of course, the said building under construction shall be classified as an investment property. Okay, so here are the examples that are not investment property, no, and therefore are outside the scope of IAS or PAS 40. Now, property held, example, a property held for use in the production or supply of goods or services or for administrative purposes. So basically, ito yung classified not as investment property but as property, plant, and equipment. By the way, property, plant, and equipment or owner-occupied properties will be the topic for the next video lecture under property, plant, and equipment. So again, kapag ang isang property ay ginagamit to produce or supply goods or services or ginagamit niyang property na yan for administrative purposes. So for example, ginawa ng owner yung building niya as office building, no? So nandun yung kanyang staff, yung mga trabahante niya, that's being used for administrative purposes. Hence, should not be classified as investment property. Property held for sale in the ordinary course of business or in the process of construction of development for such sale. Ayan. So that is not investment property but inventory. Okay? So for example, yung mga real estate developers, real estate companies or corporations, when they develop or when they build or develop buildings, of course, dahil yung nature ng business nila is to either to buy and sell real properties or to develop, construct, and sell real properties. Of course, those properties being constructed or bought, okay, should not be held as investment property kasi ibebenta nila yan when the time comes. So that should not be, again, classified as investment property, but it should be classified as inventories. Now, another example not belonging as an investment property is a property being constructed or developed on behalf of third parties. Ayan. For example, contractor ka lang. Okay, contractor ka. You are being contracted by, let's say, the government to build buildings. Okay? So, the buildings being built by a contractor is of course not an investment property kasi hindi naman sa kanya yon. Okay? Another one is an owner-occupied property. An owner-occupied property, it is not actually investment property. Okay, so meaning it is out or it's not part of the IAS or of IAS 40, but rather it should be governed by IAS 16. Ayan, IAS or PAS 16. Anyway, our Philippine Accounting Standard is adapted from International Accounting Standard or IAS. So basically, IAS and PAS is just the same. Okay? So IAS 16, of course, that's property, plant, and equipment. Again, this standard will be discussed in the next video lecture for property, plant, and equipment. Ayan. So of course, this includes property held for future use as owner-occupied property. For example, you are setting aside a certain property to be used in the future as an owner-occupied or as property, plant, and equipment. So currently, you should not classify those property as investment property, but an owner-occupied property under the scope, again, of IAS or PAS 16, property, plant, and subsequent use as owner-occupied property, no, property occupied by employees, and owner-occupied property awaiting disposal. Again, hindi siya classified as an investment property. And property leased to another entity under a finance lease. So basically, kapag si lessor, as what I have said kanina, that kapag nag-lease out ng property si lessor to the lessee, okay, basically, the lessor no longer owns the property, no? Ayan. So, the owner now of the property is the lessee. So, hindi na siya property, technically, again, ni lessor. Kasi ka-lessee na siya. Ayan. So, those are the examples of properties not as investment property. Now, we have here other classification issues, no? Okay, for example, paano naman kapag yung property ay held under an operating lease or kapag yung property ay partially yung usage na or ginagamit siya partially as an owner-occupied property or an investment property, and what happens or what should happen when there are ancillary services, no? And intra-company rentals. Ayan. So, iisa-isahin natin yan. Now, for property held under an operating lease, okay? So, a property interest that is held by a lessee under an operating lease may be classified and accounted for as investment property, provided that, okay, so, heads up lang, no? An operating lease is actually an arrangement by the lessee and the lessor. Okay? So, yung nangyari lang is, si lessor, nagrenta siya sa property, si lessee nagrenta siya sa property ni lessor. Okay? And as a result, si lessee, nagbabayad siya ng periodic rental payments to the lessor without transfer of ownership of the asset being leased. Okay? So pag tapos na or pag aalis na si lessee, babalik na naman yung the possession of the said property will revert to the lessor. So basically, walang transfer of ownership. Okay, it's just a mere renting of, let's say, an office spaces. Okay? So again, the owner under an operating lease, the owner of the property is still the lessor. Again, under an operating lease, the owner of the property is still or will still be the lessor. Okay? Ayan. However, there are instances na inform para siyang operating lease, but in substance talaga, it's finance lease pala talaga siya. Okay? So of course, meron tayong under IAS 17, no? So IAS 17 is a standard that governs the accounting for leases. Merong special cases na inform the lease arrangement is actually operating lease, but in substance, finance lease talaga siya. Okay? So, yun. Now, again, in an operating lease, the property being leased to the lessee, no, may be classified as investment property if the following are being met. That the rest of the definition of investment property is met. So, meaning, dapat yung property being leased under an operating lease is an immovable property, land or building, no? And it is held to earn rental or to earn appreciation in value, capital appreciation. Ayan. So, dapat na-meet niya yung definition na yan. Kahit na yung property, again, in form Okay, in form, operating lease siya. But again, in substance, finance lease siya. If that's the case, then the property can be classified as investment property. Another one, the operating lease is accounted for as if it were a finance lease in accordance with IAS 17. Ayan. So again, as what I have said kanina, there are operating leases in form, no? In form lang, but in substance, it's actually a finance lease. Again, the requirements of such a special case is being provided by IAS 17, okay, that governs the accounting for leases. Of course, this topic will be discussed later on. Now, the last one is that the lessee uses the fair value. So this is very important, no? That the lessee uses the fair value model set out in the standard for the asset recognized. Ayan. So, this is very critical. Bakit? Kasi, yung nangyari kasi dito is that, merong, again, let me just reiterate, merong property si lessor leased out to the lessee under an operating lease in form. But in substance, and having met the requirements by IAS 17 for special cases, the property in substance is actually leased out under a finance lease. Ayan, so na-meet niya to, yung second na requirement. And the first requirement, dapat ma-meet din niya. Dapat yung property being leased out, hindi movable property, hindi sasakyan, hindi machinery, but immovable property under IAS 40. Dapat land and building lang. And dapat si lessee, ginamit niya yung fair value model of accounting or measuring its property being leased to him or to the lessee. Dapat naka-fair value model siya. Okay? Kasi kapag yung ginamit ni lessee na measurement ay cost model, hindi na yun pwede ma-classify as ang property, hindi na siya pwede i-classify as investment property. Again, kasi sabi ng IAS 40.6, dapat accounted siya ni lessee using the fair value model. Okay? Now, once this alternative is selected for one such property interest, all property classified as investment property is to be accounted for consistently at fair value basis. Now, of course, let's say si lessee, meron nga siyang property na nilease niya from the lessor under an operating lease in form but in substance, finance lease. So, na-meet niya lahat. Tapos, nag-fair value model siya. So, na-meet niya yung property na nilease niya ay will now be classified as an investment property. So, yung other properties niya, classified as investment property, dapat i-account na niya yon lahat-lahat and using the fair value model. Hindi na siya pwede gumamit ng other measurement model. For instance, hindi na siya pwede gumamit ng cost model in measuring its the rest of its investment property. So again, dapat lahat-lahat ng investment property niya should be measured at or using the fair value model. Ayan. Okay, so another special issue is paano naman kapag yung property ay partial yung usage niya? Meaning part of the property is being used or held as an investment property and part ng property ay owner-occupied. No? Now, ganito yon. If the owner uses part of the property for its own use and part of the property naman for rentals or for capital appreciation, and the portions can be sold or leased out separately, then kailangan niya i-account yung mga portions na yun separately. What does it mean? Yung portion ng property, you have to take note na can the property be sold or leased out separately? If yes, okay, then dapat i-account niya separately. Yung portion na ginamit niya or set aside or used as an occupied property, owner-occupied property yun, or property, plant, and equipment under IAS 16. Yung other portion naman ng property na held as or to earn rental or for capital appreciation, o classify niya yun as an investment property under IAS 40. Okay? Now, what if hindi naman it cannot be sold? Or what if isang property part a portion of which ginamit for its own use, no, for manufacturing or supply of goods or services or for administrative purposes. Tapos yung other portion or other half or again other portion ay ginagamit for rental to others or for capital appreciation. Tapos it cannot be sold separately. So hindi mo siya pwede mabenta yung portion na hindi mo pwede ibenta yung portion being used for administrative purposes without also having to sell the portion that is being rented out or that is being held for capital appreciation. So kapag hindi mo sila nasi-separately sold, okay? May tayo diyan, may special case tayo diyan, no? Or consideration. Now, the property is still investment property or again kapag yung property cannot be sold out separately, pwede mo pa rin yung whole or entire property, pwede mo pa rin i-classify as an investment property only, highlighted, only kapag yung PPE part, yung property, plant, and equipment or owner-occupied portion ay insignificant. Okay? O for example, you have 50 floors yung building. Okay? Tapos, yung isang floor lang yung ginamit as for administrative purposes. Yung other 49 floors is being used or utilized as rental spaces, no, or held out as for capital appreciation. So 49 yung sa investment property na portion, isang floor lang yung sa owner occupied na portion. Very insignificant. So you can actually if such a case, then the whole building can be classified as an investment property. Ayan. So actually meron tayong guide question dito eh. Okay? For if a property is partial own use, no? So ganito 'yon. First question, is the property, the land or the building used partially to earn rental or for appreciation and for another portion is for manufacturing or administrative purposes? If yes, then property is partly investment and partly owner occupied. Okay? So kapag it can be sold out separately, edi yung portion na yun na ginamit for investment purposes, edi investment property. Yung portion naman na ginamit for as PPE or owner occupied, classify mo siya as owner occupied property. Now the second question is, can these portions be sold or leased out separately? If yes naman, wala tayong problema dyan. Okay? Wala tayong problema dyan. Now, if no naman, what if they cannot be sold out separately? Okay? If no, then the entire property can be classified only. Pwede lang daw siya matawag or ma-classify as an investment property if yung portion used for, kapag yung portion na owner-occupied, so when you see owner-occupied, meaning it is used for manufacturing and administrative purposes. Okay? Yung portion na yun ay insignificant, you can still classify the entire property as an investment property. Ayan. Okay? Now, another issue is that, what if there are ancillary services? Okay? Now, if the entity provides ancillary services to the occupants of a property held by the entity, the appropriateness of classification as investment property is determined by the significance of the services provided. So, depende kung merong mga other services or yung mga ancillary services na pinoprovide in that property, nagmamatter siya kung significant ba or insignificant. So, yung significance ng services na yon matters actually. Okay? Now, if those services are a relatively insignificant component of the arrangement as a whole, o kapag yung ancillary service daw is insignificant compared to the whole, no? For instance, example, meron kang building. Pinarentahan mo siya. Okay, pinarentahan mo siya. So basically, ano siya, investment property. Tapos yung building na yon, dahil malaki siya, so nag-hire ka ng security guards, no, to guard the entire building. So the services provided by security guards hired by the owner of the building, those services are considered as ancillary services. But very insignificant lang naman 'yon. Okay? So dahil insignificant yung service na 'yon, then the entity may treat the property as investment property. Now, kapag yung services naman provided are more significant, o for example sa hotel, 'di ba? So, kapag yung hotel, 'di ba yung services provided in a hotel, yun naman talaga yung hindi pwede or hindi tatakbo or hindi mag-earn ang isang hotel kapag walang hotel services. Okay? So kapag walang mga room services and all other hotel services, walang pupunta sa hotel na 'yan. As a result, walang income. Okay? So yung hotel services provided or yung services provided by a hotel, that's very significant. Again, when you actually, compare it to the entire revenue revenue generation, no, of that property. So if that's the case, then you cannot kasi the ancillary service is very significant. Then you cannot qualify the property as an investment property, but you should classify the said property as owner occupied property. Okay? Yan. And lastly is intra-company rentals. No? For example, there is a parent and subsidiary. No? Now, property rented to a parent, subsidiary, or fellow subsidiary is not investment property in consolidated financial statement. Kasi, heads up lang, no? When you say consolidated financial statement, ito yung financial statement both ni parent and ni subsidiary. Consolidated. Kumbaga, they are being, they are seen as a whole. Okay? So, hindi naman pwede hindi pwede na si business, si entity, nagrenta siya sa kanyang sarili din. Okay? Kasi, when you look at the consolidated financial statement, you look at the whole, the entire business together, no? The entire business talaga as a whole. Hindi mo nakikita yung parent at saka subsidiary, but as a whole. Okay? So, for consolidated financial statement purposes, the said property being lent from or by the principal to the subsidiary or from the subsidiary to the principal is actually not an investment property. Mangyari lang yung investment property in the perspective of, separate financial statement. When you prepare separate financial statement, so meron kasi tayong separate financial statement at consolidated financial statement. Kapag yung piniprepare mo ay separate financial statement, for example, financial statement lang ni subsidiary, tapos si subsidiary nagparenta siya ng space to the principal, no, to its principal. For purposes or for separate financial statement purposes, yung property na pinarenta niya to the principal is what? An investment property. Pero kapag yung piniprepare na ay consolidated financial statement, wala nang investment property. Okay? Ayan. Now, recognition. Okay? So, when should we recognize an investment property as an asset? So, we recognize it as an asset when, okay? Ayan, so asset recognition principle, no? Balik tayo sa asset recognition principle natin. Okay? Again, we recognize an investment property as an asset when it is probable that future economic benefits that are associated with the property will flow to the entity. And the cost of the property can be reliably measured. Okay? So, kasi kapag you cannot reliably measure the cost of the said property, hindi yan asset. Okay? So, both of these should be present. Now, for initial measurement naman, recognize mo na siya as asset. Alam mo na asset na yung asset talaga yung investment property. Now, lagyan mo na naman ng monetary value. How much? Okay, what is its value? Okay, so Again, meron tayong initial measurement and subsequent measurement. Dito muna tayo sa initial measurement. How do you initially measure an investment property? So, investment property accordingly is initially measured at cost. Okay, including transaction costs. No? So, yung transaction costs dito are those costs that are directly attributable to the development, purchase, or acquisition of the said property. Direct. So, dapat yung transaction cost na i-incur siya directly due to the purchase or development of the said investment property. Only then can you add this transaction cost to the cost of initial measurement or as an initial measurement of the said investment property. Okay? But such cost for initial measurement of this investment property should not include startup cost, abnormal waste, or initial operating losses incurred before the investment property achieves the planned level of occupancy. So itong mga cost na to, startup cost, again, mga abnormal waste or initial operating losses, these are not direct costs. No, they are not direct costs. They are not direct transaction costs. Hence, they should not be lumped or added to the cost of the investment property in its initial measurement or for initial measurement. Ayan. Now, we're done with initial measurement. What about subsequently? For example, January 1 mo siya binili. You need a cost. You need to measure the investment property on January 1. That's initial measurement. Paano yan? Pag December 31 na. Okay? So, here comes subsequent measurement. Okay? So, according to IAS 40, no, it permits entities to choose between fair value model and cost model. So, sa January 1, measured niya at cost, not cost model na, but at cost. Kung how much is the transaction price and all other direct transaction cost, yun yung initial measurement ng investment property. On December 31, subsequent to initial measurement, okay, you can measure the property using the fair value model or the cost model. Ayan. Now, IAS 40 requires that one method must be adopted for all of an entity's investment property. So, hindi pwede na yung building mo, nag-fair value model ka, yung land mo, nag-cost model ka, hindi. All of them should be used or should be measured using the same measurement model. Yan. So, however, changes is permitted only if this results in a more appropriate presentation. That's according, again, to IAS 40. Notes that this is highly unlikely for a change from a fair value model to a cost model. So that is the requirement measurement, no, subsequent to initial recognition required by IAS 40. Now let's discuss fair value model. So in a fair value model, investment property is remeasured at fair value. Kung ano yung value niya at year-end subsequent to initial measurement, if nag-fair value model ka, yun yung magiging panibagong value ng asset, ng investment property mo, which is the amount in which the property could be exchanged between knowledgeable, willing parties in an arm's length transaction. Ayan, at fair value. Now, dahil nag-change yung fair value niya, subsequent to initial measurement, dahil nag-change yung value niya, the changes in the value of investment property measured under fair value model or using fair value model, okay, the gains or losses, no, should be included in the net profit or loss for the period in which it arises. So, kapag lumaki yung value ng asset mo at year-end, yung increase ng value niya, gain. Kapag lumiit naman yung value niya at year-end, yung decrease ng value, loss, reported in profit or loss statement. Now, when a property has previously been measured at fair value, it should continue to be measured at fair value until disposal, even if comparable market transactions become less frequent or market prices becomes less readily available. So, dapat, kapag yung asset, minessure siya at fair value subsequent to initial measurement, kapag gumamit ka na ng fair value model, dapat fair value model na talaga yung gamitin mo. No, to adhere to the principle of consistency. So hindi pwede na this year nag fair value model ka, next year nag cost model ka na naman, hindi pwede 'yon. You are violating the principle of consistency. Ayan. Now, ano naman yung cost model? So, after initial recognition, investment property is accounted for at or in accordance with the cost model as set out in IAS 16, no property, plant, and equipment. So, that's gonna be cost less accumulated depreciation and less accumulated impairment loss. Ayan. So, kung ano yung cost mo at initial measurement, yun yung gagamitin mo using cost model. At subsequent to initial measurement, for example, year-end, kung ano yung cost na na-determine mo upon the purchase or acquisition of the investment property, yun pa din yung cost niya at year-end minus accumulated depreciation and accumulated impairment loss. Okay? So that's cost model. Now, paano yung fair value? Kapag nag-cost model ka, i-disregard mo na yung fair value, no? So wala ka nang pake kung tataas, bababa yung fair value niya at year-end kasi cost model yung ginamit mo. Okay? Pero, for disclosure purposes, if the entity uses the cost model in measuring its investment property, the fair value of the said property at year-end, kailangan pa rin siya i-disclose sa notes to financial statement. So, there is still a need for a disclosure of its fair value. Ayan. We have here an illustration. Illustration tayo. Now, an entity ventured into constructing a shopping mall. Okay, so nag-construct na si entity ng shopping mall and decided to hold the property for purposes of earning rental income by letting out spaces to tenants. So, pinarentahan niya yung shopping malls. Natapos daw at nagamit daw yung mall niya on January 1, 2021. Now, the cost of the building or the mall is 100 million. Tapos yung useful life niya is 10 years. Okay, so yung building niya, it can only be used for 10 years. And after 10 years, pag natapos na yung useful life niya, pwede siya mabenta for 10 million. That's the residual value. Now, merong independent valuation na nag-provide ang isang valuation expert. Okay? Na yung value daw ng building, again natapos at ginamit January 1, 2021. Sabi ng valuation expert, yung fair value, pag binenta mo yung building na yan on December 31, 2021, a year after, you can sell it out for 120 million. Kapag binenta mo naman siya on December 31, 2022, 2 years after, you can sell it out for 125 million. Pero kapag binenta mo na siya on December 31, 2023, you can only sell it out for 115 million. Ayan. So basically, the shopping mall shall be recognized as investment property. Okay? Kasi immovable property siya. Tapos, it is being used or held to earn rental income. Ayan, to earn rents. So, pwede siya investment property. Investment property siya. Okay? Again, meron siyang cost provided and yung valuation expert nag-provide din siya ng fair value. Okay? Ayan. Now, merong two options, no? Merong two options. Ayan. By the way, for on initial recognition or initial measurement, 100 million yung value ng shopping mall. This is, again ito yung sinasabing initial measurement. 100 million. Now, subsequently, at year-end, on December 31, 2021, the entity can actually use cost model or the fair value model. Now, kapag nag-cost model siya, okay, kapag cost model yung ginamit niya, the entity shall not recognize the fair value changes from year to year. But the said fair value shall only be disclosed. Okay? So, again, kapag nag-cost model siya, hindi niya kinukonsider yung fair value. Dinidisregard niya. Pero, dinidisclose pa rin niya sa notes to financial statement. Ayan. So, at year-end, meron siyang entry. No? Meron siyang entry. Depreciation. dapat may entry for depreciation. Kasi, nagamit na yung shopping mall for 1 year. On December 31, from January 1, 2021 to December 31, 2021. So, paano nga kunin si depreciation expense? That's acquisition cost. Okay, di ba? 100 million yon. Acquisition cost minus the salvage or residual value na 10 million. That's 100 minus 10 million, that's 90 million yung depreciable amount. So dahil usable siya in 10 years, so that's 90 million divided by 10 years, the depreciation expense every year is 9 million. Kaya on December 31, 2016, mag-entry si entity ng depreciation expense debit, credit accumulated depreciation for 9 million. That's cost model. Now, kapag ginamit naman niya is fair value model, changes in fair value of the investment property shall be recognized through profit or loss. Okay? So, yung mga changes ng fair value, ng value ng property niya at year-end, recognized through profit or loss. Tapos, kapag fair value model yung gamitin natin, we do not recognize or record depreciation. So, hindi natin siya dini-depreciate. So, walang depreciation expense. Accumulated depreciation na entry at year-end kapag yung ginamit ay fair value model. Okay? Let's discuss the entries no kapag nag-fair value model tayo. So, again, ito yung information. Ito yung fair value daw ng properties on December 31, 2021 to 2023 provided by a valuation expert. So, basically, ito yung fair value niya. Again, ito yung cost 100 million. Dahil nag-fair value model siya, hindi tayo at year-end, December 31, 2021, hindi tayo nagre-record ng depreciation expense. Instead, yung nire-record natin is yung changes ng fair value. Yung cost, 100 million on January 1, 2021, pero yung value niya on December 31, 2021 is 120 million. So there is an increase in the fair value by 20 million. That's 120 million fair value on December 31, 2021 minus the cost on January 1, 2021, that's 20 million. So debit investment property to recognize the increase in its value and the credit to gain from change in fair value to be reported in the profit or loss. That's 20 million. Now, for 2022 naman, nag-increase no on December 31, 2021, 120 million. Pagka 2022, naging 125 million. Oh, how much is the increase? That's 5 million. Okay? So, debit ka naman ng investment property, credit, gain from change in fair value for 5 million. And lastly, in December 31, 2023, naging 115 million na lang from 125 million on December 31, 2022. So, there is a decrease in the value. By how much? 10 million. So dahil nag-decrease ang value by 10 million, so the 10 million decrease is loss from change in fair value for 10 million. And a credit to investment property for 10 million. That's 125 million minus 115 million. Okay? That's cost model and fair value model. Now, what if there are transfers, no? So, transfers to or from investment property classification. So, tinransfer mo yung classification ng property from investment property to an owner-occupied property and vice versa. So, ano mangyayari, no? Now, transfers to or from investment property should only be made when there is a change in use evidenced by one or more of the following. So, eto yon. Ayan. Nag-commence na yung owner occupation. So, tinransfer niya from investment property to owner-occupied property. So, kung noon, pinarenta niya investment property. Pero, currently, ginamit na niya as office building o so, owner-occupied property or PPE na siya. So, kailangan i-transfer from investment property to owner-occupied property. Commencement of development with a view to say, so kapag dinevelop na siya, yung investment property noon na held for let's say capital appreciation pero subsequently dinevelop para ibenta o kailangan mo siya i-transfer from investment property to inventory. Kasi yung purpose mo is to sell, no? End of owner occupation. Ayan. So, transfer from owner-occupied property to investment property. So, hindi niya ginamit as an office building kasi pinarentahan na niya. So, from owner-occupied property to ano na siya, investment property. Commencement of an operating lease. Ayan, to another party. So, transfer from inventories naman to investment property. And end of construction or development. Ayan, so, tapos na yung construction or development. So, you can now transfer the property in the course of construction or development to investment property. So, basically, ito yung mga transfers. So, from, again, investment property to an owner-occupied property to an inventories or as an inventory and vice versa. Ayan. Now, of course, when there are transfers, there are rules, no? So, ano ba yung mga rules that will apply for accounting for transfers between categories? Now, kapag yung transfer ay from investment property carried at fair value to owner-occupied property or inventory, okay? Yung fair value at the change of use will be now the cost of the property under its new classification. Okay? For example, on December 31, 2021, 120 million yung value ng building. Okay? And from that moment, naka-decide yung owner na ibenta na siya, okay? So magiging inventory, dinevelop tapos ibenta, magiging inventory yun. Or, ginamit niya as office building. So kung ano yung fair value December 31, 2021, yun na yung magiging cost ng building under or in its new classification as, again, an inventory or an owner-occupied property. Okay? So 125 million ay 120 million na yung magiging value na yun ang property na yun under its new classification. Now, for a transfer from owner-occupied property naman, so owner-occupied property IAS 16 to investment property at fair value. So, paano yan? So, mag-apply si IAS 16, no? Kasi from owner-occupied property or PPE ang nag-apply dyan, IAS 16. Tapos, tinransfer niya to investment property at fair value. Okay? So, any difference, so ganito lang yan, any difference arising between the carrying amount under IAS 16 at that date and the fair value is dealt with as a revaluation under IAS 16. Yan. So, at the time na tinransfer siya from owner-occupied to an investment property, kunin mo muna yung carrying value niya. Okay? At the moment na tinransfer niya. Tapos, pag nakuha mo na yung carrying amount niya, tapos diba yung purpose is gawing investment property, tapos we measure at fair value. O, syempre may difference yun, no? Most probably may difference. So you get the difference between the fair value as an investment property and the carrying amount as an owner-occupied property during the date of transfer. The difference shall be dealt with as a revaluation, no, under IAS 16. Of course, the topic of revaluation will be discussed at the later on. Okay? That would be through a separate video lecture. Now, another one. Kapag yung transfer is from inventories, ayan, to investment property at fair value, so kapag inventory siya, tapos tinransfer mo or ni-reclassify mo as an investment property, tapos to be measured at fair value, the difference between the fair value at the date of transfer and its previous carrying amount as an inventory should be recognized in profit or loss. So kung ano yung value niya as an inventory and as an investment property, the difference ng values na yon, no, will be recognized in profit or loss. Now, when an entity naman completes construction or development of an investment property that will be carried at fair value, the difference between the fair value at the date of transfer and the previous carrying amount should be recognized in profit or loss. Ayan. Now, when an entity uses the cost model for investment property, transfers between categories do not change the carrying amount of the property transferred. And they do not change the cost of the property for measurement or disclosure purposes. Kapag yung cost model yung ginamit niya sa investment property niya, kapag nag-cost model siya, kahit in-transfer na yan siya as property, plant, and equipment or as an inventory, uh, the cost, no, under cost model, the cost of the said property under cost model will remain. It will not change. Okay? Ayan. Okay, the recognition. When should when should we derecognize an investment property? So an investment property shall be derecognized. So when you see derecognized, tanggalin na siya, no, from the investment property account. Okay? Kapag dinispose na yung asset, kapag winidraw na siya from use, or wala na siyang benefit, wala na siyang future economic benefit. So kapag wala ng future economic benefit that is expected to flow from the investment property, hindi na siya asset, di ba? Okay? As per asset recognition principle. Yan. So derecognize na siya as an investment property. Okay? And the gain or loss on disposal should be calculated as the difference between the net disposal proceeds. So kapag how much is the amount that the owner received upon disposal of the said property and the carrying amount of the said property or asset, okay, and should be recognized as income or expense in the income statement. Okay? Ayan. So, kumbaga yung the difference ng carrying amount and the net proceeds upon the disposal of the said asset shall be recognized in profit or loss. And the compensation from third parties is recognized also when it becomes receivable. Ayan. And ayan, so here we are now with the last part, the disclosures. So I am giving everybody the benefit, no, of reading, no, these disclosures as provided by IAS 40. Ayan. Okay? So ayan, that's the discussion for investment property. Ayan. Thank you for watching.